I think Dana Barros, I think he gave me a
Oh,
50.
I remember Dana Barros. Folks,
Man,
hey.
he gave me a 50 ball in Philly. It wasn't nothing you can do as a guard because once that screen came, he was splitting the big every time. And his jumper was so wet, it was stupid.
He planned to be the point guard of the future in Seattle before Gary Payton took over. Then he would be the last player to wear number 3 in Philadelphia before the arrival of Allen Iverson. Dana Barros was a time traveler, bringing a playstyle to 90s basketball that would eventually define modern-day NBA. He was a shooting guard trapped in a point guard's body, but at 5'11", he was undersized at any position. Yet he made up for it as one of the fastest and overall most athletic players in the NBA during his career. He could dribble through the defense, slice to the hoop, and finish with a layup or floater. But in an era that valued high percentage shots, the shots you didn't want Barros taking came from beyond the arc, as he loved the three-point shot, yet was remarkably efficient in shooting it. And unlike a lot of so-called shot chuckers, Barros overall was a great decision maker when it came to shooting. He was a Boston College legend before spending years on the bench in Seattle. He broke out with the Sixers in '95, but a return to Boston right after that would see his role gradually decline with the Celtics and then Pistons. Dana Barros had a game that coaches weren't ready for. It scared teams away from him because it went against everything that was thought of as winning basketball at the time. And although Dana Barros played in the past, he gave fans a glimpse into the future. Let's jog your memory. A Boston native, Dana Barros attended Xaverian Brothers High School in Massachusetts, where as a freshman, he would struggle to even get the ball to the hoop on medium to long-range shots. So he began sitting below the hoop and practicing his shot meticulously until he mastered his form and was able to generate the power he needed from a flick of the wrist. And that would help him become one of the school's greatest players, where as a senior, he would average over 30 points per game, en route to being named Boston Herald and Boston Globe Player of the Year. So Barros proved he had the talent and the work ethic, but the one thing he was missing was the size. As at just 5'11", he was more well-known and more valued as an All-American defensive back and receiver, with some of the best football programs recruiting him. But he wanted to play basketball, yet felt like no one wanted him. But he would have an offer to stay close to home, as he would enroll at Boston College for the '86 season. If there was one program who knew how dangerous undersized high-scoring guards could be, it was Boston College, as they had just seen Michael Adams put together one of the greatest careers in school history and get drafted over the summer. So that also meant they needed his replacement, and that's where Barros came in. Barros was a starter from day one and would lead the team in minutes as a freshman, while also leading the Eagles in assists and steals, yet still finishing second in scoring, and impressively shooting nearly 48% from the field. The Eagles had a good offense, yet also featured one of the nation's worst defenses. And after making it all the way to the Sweet 16 last year, their 13-15 record this year wouldn't get them any tournament consideration, as Barros would end his freshman year with averages of about 13.5 points, 3.5 assists, and 2 steals per game. The Eagles had a new coach going into Barros' sophomore season in Jim O'Brien, and O'Brien would encourage team defense, as Boston College now became a solid defense. Yet they would put up nearly 10 less points per game as one of the nation's lowest scoring teams. But there was one player who they encouraged to focus on offense, and that was Barros. Barros was again tops on the team in assists and steals, yet this year would also be the team's leading scorer, as he would even be a top 5 scorer in the Big East. But something else changed this season, which benefited Barros immensely, as the NCAA officially adopted the three-point line, with Barros attempting 173 shots from beyond the arc and making over 40% of them. As the lightning-quick inside-outside threat for the Eagles would be named second team All-Big East. But this was unfortunately another underwhelming season for Boston College. They had a promising 6-1 start, but they would be dominated in conference play, going 3-13. Yet they would have one memorable win on February 3rd, when they would defeat number 17 ranked Providence, with Barros scoring 20 in the game. Boston College would have a solid Big East tourney, as they would defeat UConn before losing a close one to Georgetown in the semis. But with an 11-18 record, they wouldn't get a tournament bid, as Barros' sophomore season had seen him average about 18.5 points, 4 assists, and a steal per game. 1988 would be a breakout year for Barros, as he would up his numbers across the board from last season, leading the team in scoring and steals per game, and this year he would attempt over 7 threes per game, yet still make over 45% of them, as he would lead the Big East in made and attempted threes, with his incredible shooting leading to him finishing 1988 as the Big East's leading scorer, and would in turn be named first team All-Conference. The Eagles would start the year 4-0 with some great offensive performances, and although they would perform much better this year, conference play was again their downfall, going 6-10. Yet they would squeak out a 2-point defeat of 11th-ranked Georgetown in the middle of the season. The conference tourney was over quick as they got bounced by Syracuse in round 1, and although they again wouldn't receive a tournament bid, their 14-13 record was enough to warrant an NIT invite, and they were looking good, as they would defeat Siena, Evansville, and then Middle Tennessee State to start. But they would lose to UConn in the semifinals, then fall to Colorado State in the third-place game to end their season, as Barros wrapped up his junior year with averages of about 22 points, 4 assists, and 1.5 steals per game. 1989 was a step back for the Eagles. They had lost one of their top scorers to graduation in Jamie Benton, as they only had 2 players who averaged at least 9 points a game, with Barros obviously being one of them. The senior tied for the team lead in steals and led the team in assists, and his career-high 23.9 points per game would again lead the team and the conference. His three-point shooting had dropped to about 43%, but that was still lights out, as he was now attempting 9 threes per game, to again lead the conference in made and attempted threes, en route to being named second team all-conference. And although the Eagles again flopped in conference play, going 3-13, Barros had a career performance in a January 7th defeat of Pittsburgh, when he dropped 43 points, which included 9 made threes. But the Eagles were only able to manage an 11-15 regular season record, and after defeating St. John's in the quarterfinals of the Big East tourney, they would fall to Georgetown in the semis, and again be excluded from the NCAA tournament, as Barros' senior year had seen him average about 24 points, 3.5 assists, and 1.5 steals per game. So Barros ended his college career as the first player in program history to surpass 2,000 career points. And while he didn't have much team success and had never been to the big dance, he showed that individually he was a pro-caliber player, as leading one of the nation's best conferences in scoring for 2 consecutive seasons is no easy task, especially when every team's defensive game plan was to stop Barros. And while he may not have had the NBA height, he had the NBA athleticism, as in college he reportedly ran a 4.3 40 and also possessed a 43-inch vertical leap. So how could teams pass that up? While a few teams did pass it up, he still went in the first round of the '89 draft, 16th overall to the Seattle Supersonics, as they would make 2 picks back-to-back, with the second being another athletic freak who had never played a college game, named Shawn Kemp. The Sonics had some mid-'80s success, but they hadn't had any great regular seasons during that time, yet they were still a young team with a lot of promising talent. Their top players were Dale Ellis and Xavier McDaniel, and while Nate McMillan would be their primary starter at point guard this year, he was more of a natural 2-guard, so Barros seemed to have a legitimate shot at the starting lineup if he played well. But the Sonics already had a very capable backup in Sadell Threet. Barros would still get plenty of opportunity as part of a 3-guard rotation, and although he didn't become a full-time starter, he would start 25 of the 81 games he appeared in, and was one of 7 players on the team to get at least 20 minutes a game. And in the games he started, Barros had some incredible offensive production, albeit a little inefficient, as overall this season, he would hit double figures in 35 games and record 12 games with at least 20, with his best performance coming in a March 9th loss to Atlanta, when he had a 26-point, 10-assist double-double while making 5 3-pointers. And Barros got lucky, as the Sonics were one of the higher volume 3-point shooting teams in the NBA, so he would get to launch from distance, as he would finish second on the team with nearly 3 attempts per game, and even with the NBA's extended 3-point distance, he still made about 40% of them. However, Seattle was just a middle-of-the-pack team in 1990, hovering around 500 all year, as they finished at 41-41 and missed the playoffs, with Barros' rookie year seeing him average about 9.5 points, 2.5 assists, and half a steal per game. But the Sonics possessed the second pick in the upcoming draft, and while this was great news for the franchise, it was not so great for Barros' young career. The 1990 draft saw the Sonics select Gary Payton second overall, who was a more highly regarded and more complete point guard than Barros, and at 6'4", he had the size you wanted at the position, as he would immediately become their new starter. And in a weird way, Barros and Payton were technically traded for each other. Prior to the '89 draft, Golden State possessed the 16th overall pick, yet traded it to Seattle for the Sonics' first-round pick in the 1990 draft. But about a month later, Golden State sent the pick back to Seattle for big man Alton Lister. But getting back to the '91 season, Payton was firmly cemented in the starting lineup, and during the season, the Sonics would trade both McDaniel and Ellis for Eddie Johnson and Ricky Pierce respectively. And with a quickly improving Shawn Kemp, new coach Casey Jones had a lot of players he needed to find minutes for. And one of the players who would see his minutes suffer the most was Barros, with another reason for this being that his defense wasn't on par with his offense, as in college, he was actually encouraged not to play defense. So Barros dropped from over 20 minutes as a rookie to less than 12 in year 2, and would only appear in 66 games with 0 starts. Yet the production was still there, as made evident by his per 36 numbers, and he would still manage to hit double figures in 14 games, including 3 with at least 20. The Sonics remained as a middle-of-the-pack team, again finishing with a 41-41 record, but this year it would be enough for the 8th seed and a first-round matchup with Portland. This would end up a close series after Seattle came back from down 0-2 to force a Game 5, yet Portland would take the decider. However, Barros would only see the floor in 3 games, and although he hit double figures in 2 of them, they were mostly garbage time points, as his disappointing second year had seen him average about 6.5 points, 1.5 assists, and half a steal per game. Come the 92 season, the Sonics looked the same, and this year didn't have to worry about the inner conflict that resulted in the trades of Ellis and McDaniel. So with a more stable situation, Coach Jones was better able to manage minutes, and in turn, Barros saw nearly a 4-minute increase over the first half of the season. But in that time, the Sonics were underwhelming, as after an 18-18 start, Jones would be fired, and after 4 games with interim coach Bob Kloppenberg, they brought in George Karl. And although Karl's trademark fast-paced, high-scoring offense wouldn't be fully implemented for a few seasons, he still saw the value in the quick, high-scoring Barros, as under Karl, Barros' minutes and production would increase, as he would attempt nearly 1 more 3 per contest after the Karl hiring. And whether it was before Karl or after, Barros was hitting his 3s, as his 44.6% clip from beyond the arc would lead the league. So although he wasn't in line for a starting position, Barros was back to being a regular part of the rotation, and the Sonics improved after the Karl hiring, as they were able to finish with a 47-35 record, which would get them a first-round matchup with Golden State. Barros wouldn't appear in Game 1, which the Sonics would win. Then in Game 2, he would hit a 3-pointer off the bench in a Sonics loss. Game 3 would see him score 9 points on 3 of 3 from deep, as Seattle went up 2-1. And although he wouldn't appear in Game 4, the Sonics got past the Warriors in a gentleman's sweep. Round 2 brought Utah, and Barros continued to provide the Sonics with instant offense off the bench, as he would have 8 points on 4 of 5 shooting in a Game 1 loss, then would hit both of his 3s in a Game 2 loss, followed by hitting both his 3s in a Game 3 win. Then with his first made 3 in Game 4, Barros had started the postseason going 9 of 9 from deep, but he would experience his first misses this game as the Sonics lost. Then Utah would wrap it up in Game 5 as Barros went 0 for 4 from deep. But Barros' third year had ended with him averaging about 8.5 points, 1.5 assists, and half a steal per game. It was another year on the bench for Barros in 93, but with a full season of Karl, Barros would average his highest minutes per game since his rookie year. Barros appeared in 69 games this season, but in those games he would hit double figures in 24 of them, with his best performance coming in a November 27th defeat of Dallas, when he dropped a season-high 26 points while going 3 of 4 from deep. And the Sonics as a whole were starting to put it all together. From mid-February to early March, they would string together 10 straight wins. And during that time was the All-Star break, which included the 3-point shootout, where Barros was a participant. And although he didn't win, he deserved to be there, as he shot the most 3s out of any Sonic by far, yet still made about 39% of them. The Sonics had an underwhelming 9-6 end to the season, but with a 55-27 record, they were set for a playoff rematch with Utah. But Barros wasn't set as a major part of the lineup, appearing in 3 out of 5 games and playing a combined 12 minutes in a series win for Seattle. The second round versus Houston would be better, as Barros would appear in the first 3 games, even scoring 7 points in 50 minutes of action in Game 3. Yet after not appearing in Game 4, Barros and the Sonics were deadlocked at 2 games apiece. Game 5 would see Barros score 9 points in only about 3 minutes of action, but as this was a blowout for Seattle, they were mostly garbage minutes. He would give them 4 points and 3 assists in a Game 6 loss, but in Game 7, he took 3 shots and made all 3, to give the Sonics a 7-point boost, which was much needed in their 3-point win to punch their ticket to the conference finals. Waiting for them were the Phoenix Suns, and although it was a tough series, Phoenix would outlast them to win it in 7, as Barros had minimal contributions in the series, but his season had ended with him averaging about 8 points, 2 assists, and a steal per game. But over the offseason, Barros was finally going to get out of Seattle and get a real opportunity. In early September, Barros was a throw-in for a trade package sent to Charlotte, which saw Seattle receive a package headlined by Kendall Gill. Then just 2 days later, he was included in a package to Philly for a package headlined by Hersey Hawkins. But Philly held on to him, as he was going to be suiting up for the Sixers in 1994. The year prior had been Philly's first without Charles Barkley, with their top 2 players being Hawkins and Jeff Hornacek. Both were natural 2 guards, but Hornacek played primarily at point guard in '93. So with the Sixers seeing an opportunity to start building for the future, they pulled off the Barros trade and were able to shift Hornacek back to his natural position in '94. The Sixers didn't have a lot on the roster, but they did feature the second-year Clarence Weatherspoon, as well as their top pick from this year's draft in Shawn Bradley. But Bradley would manage just 49 games before suffering a season-ending knee injury, and the aforementioned Hornacek would be shipped to Utah at the deadline for Jeff Malone. Barros came off the bench to begin the season, but once he was more comfortable with the offense, he would become the starting point guard for his final 70 games, and he really started showing what he could do. He averaged over 31 minutes per game, as this would lead to the first season of his career averaging double-figure scoring, and he would finish second on the Sixers in assists and steals, on then career-high numbers, as he would even finish top 10 in most improved player voting. Barros would hit double figures in 58 games, including 15 games with at least 20, and 4 double-doubles. And even though he was taking more shots than he had ever taken in his career, he still shot a respectable 47% from the field and 38% from deep, as he would be top 10 in three-point attempts this season and top 5 in makes, and would again have a spot in the three-point shootout, where this year he would come up just short, finishing as runner-up to winner Mark Price at All-Star Weekend. And while it was a season of individual improvement for Barros, it was a different story for team success, as the Sixers were a team in transition, boasting one of the league's worst offenses and defenses, as they finished with a 25-57 record and missed the playoffs, as Barros' first season in Philly had seen him average about 13.5 points, 5 assists, and 1.5 steals per game. But he had showed that he was capable of being a starter in the NBA, and 1995 would show that he was capable of being a star. But Barros was still worried to begin the '95 season. He didn't feel that he had done anything spectacular to keep himself in the Sixers' good graces. And now they had a new coach in former point guard John Lucas and a new first-round pick in point guard BJ Tyler. But while many thought Tyler would be Lucas's protege, the two butted heads early, as Tyler was no threat to Barros' starting position. But if by the off chance Barros no longer had a future in the NBA, it was learned early in the season that he could likely have a successful rap career, as his own track called Check It and his feature on You Don't Stop would be featured on the B-Ball's Best Kept Secret collaboration album. The Sixers had even less firepower in '95, as Malone would deal with foot problems all year and only appear in 19 games. So Philly had to rely on Barros and Weatherspoon for their scoring, with Barros being the best surprise, as he would lead the team on a career-high 20.6 points per game, which was a top 20 mark in the league. Yet he would only take 14.2 shots per game to reach that average, as he shot 49% from the field. And to put that into perspective, Steph Curry needed the same amount of shots to average 18.6 points in the 2011 season. So even though sometimes it looked like Barros was trying to find any opening to hoist up a shot, he knew what shots he could hit, and almost always only attempted the smart shot, as his 1,165 total shot attempts were the least among any player in the league's top 20 for scoring this season. Barros also led the Sixers in assists at a career-high 7.5 per game, which would be good for 11th in the league, as Barros was one of just 3 players this season to average at least 20 points and at least 10 assists, with the other 2 being his former teammate in Seattle, Gary Payton, and a budding star in Orlando named Penny Hardaway. And although the Sixers only won 24 games this year, it was mostly because of Barros, as he finished with the second most offensive win shares in the league with 10.5. The only player above him, league MVP David Robinson with 10.7. And you can't forget about the three-pointers. Barros would attempt a career-high 425 threes in the first season of the NBA experimenting with a shortened three-point line, as that would be the 11th most in the league. But his 197 made threes would be 4th in the league, and his 46.4 percentage from beyond the arc would be a career high and the 3rd best mark in the league, as he would once again be a three-point shootout participant at All-Star Weekend. '95 would see Barros hit double figures in 73 games, as well as 20 double-doubles, which included a career-high 19 assists to go along with 28 points in a January 4th loss to Phoenix. And he would record his first triple-double in an April 8th defeat of Orlando, when he had 25 points, 10 rebounds, and 15 assists. On January 27th, he would set a Sixers franchise record and personal career high when he exploded for 9 made threes en route to 39 points in a close loss to Phoenix. And that 50-point game Nick Van Exel was talking about in the beginning was actually 41 points, along with 8 assists on nearly 61% shooting, while going 7 of 11 from deep. But Barros did have a 50-point game this season. On March 14th, Philly took on the defending champion Houston Rockets, and while this was a blowout win for Houston, Barros made his mark, as in the game he would drop a career-high 50 points, along with 6 rebounds and 8 assists. Impressively, he scored 50 while only making 2 trips to the free throw line, and more impressively, he reached the half-century mark on just 26 shots, making 21 of them, and going 6 of 8 from deep, as this had put an exclamation point on a 95 season, which not only saw Barros be named Most Improved Player, but also saw him voted to his first All-Star game, where he would score 5 points and dish 3 assists. But even with all of Barros' offense, the Sixers were one of the lowest scoring teams in the league, as they would again miss the playoffs, with Barros' All-Star year ending with him averaging about 20.5 points, 7.5 assists, and 2 steals per game. But if you blinked, you missed it, as Barros would never again get the green light like he had in 1995. Barros was a free agent this offseason and said he would have considered re-signing with Philly, but felt that they lowballed him with a 3-year, $9 million offer, and that in late September, it was announced that he would be returning home after signing a 6-year deal worth about $21 million with the Boston Celtics. But this signing didn't make a lot of sense, as the Celtics already had veteran guards D. Brown and Sherman Douglas, so it was going to be tough for head coach ML Carr to find minutes for all of them. But as Larry Bird would later say, he soon found out that the Barros signing wasn't a basketball decision as much as it was a marketing decision, as Barros was the local kid returning to play for his hometown team. Douglas would be traded early, but the Celtics were still crowded in the backcourt, as along with Barros and Brown, they featured David Wesley, Todd Day, and Greg Minor. Barros would still have one of the largest roles on the team, yet was used as more of a sixth man, but he would start for a little over a month after the Douglas trade. Barros saw a major hit in his production, which can largely be attributed to the Celtics' playstyle, as they like to get the ball down low to their bigs a lot more than in Philly. So Barros wouldn't have the same freedom to utilize his elite athleticism to get himself open shots. And Barros was also unselfish. He didn't mind deferring to the game plan and to his bigs, even if it took away from what made him most effective. However, he still performed well, as he would finish top 3 on the team in scoring and assists while shooting 47% from the field. And he was still a prolific 3-point shooter, leading the Celtics in 3-point attempts while finishing top 15 in the NBA in made threes, as he again shot over 40% from deep, hitting double figures in 56 games and recording 2 double-doubles. Yet his most memorable moment of the season wasn't a great one, as dating back to last season, Barros went 89 consecutive games with at least 1 made 3-pointer, until the streak was snapped in a January 12th loss to New York, which was an NBA record at the time and would stand until broken by Kyle Korver in 2013. Unfortunately, the Celtics weren't much better than the Sixers. They were just bad in a different way, as they had one of the league's highest scoring offenses with one of its worst defenses, and would finish with a 33-49 record and miss the playoffs, with Barros' season seeing him average about 13 points, 4 assists, and half a steal per game. 1997 would be disappointing for Barros. The Celtics had just drafted Antoine Walker, so there was reason for excitement, but Barros could barely stay on the court. He was on the floor opening night and had a great 24-point and 6-assist performance in a loss to Chicago, and would hit double figures in 15 of his first 22 games. But he wasn't at 100%, as he was struggling from the beginning of the year with bone spurs in his left ankle, and eventually he would start missing time in late December, playing in only 2 games from December 22nd to February 7th, when it was announced that Barros would undergo surgery to repair his injured ankle. And while he might have been able to return late in the season, the Celtics were well out of playoff contention, so Barros would sit out the remainder of the year for a Celtics team who finished at 15-67, as Barros' year had seen him average about 12.5 points, 3.5 assists, and a steal per game. But in a league that moves on from players quickly, all this time lost to injury greatly affected the remainder of Barros' career. The 98 Celtics had hired former Kentucky Wildcats head coach Rick Pitino, and after his hiring, he would draft and trade for 2 of his former players, as this Celtics lineup featured a lot of Wildcats, and Barros would receive a lot less minutes as a backup point guard. After averaging over 29 minutes per game over his first 2 seasons in Boston, he would only get about 21 this year. But at least he was available, as he would appear in 80 games this season, but would average less than 10 points per game for the first time since leaving Seattle. He would start 15 games over the season and give the Celtics better numbers in these games, yet would also see his efficiency drop significantly. And in his 65 games off the bench, his numbers may not have been as good, but his efficiency was very impressive. Nonetheless, he would still manage 38 games in double figures and 4 games with at least 20, while recording 1 double-double. and the Celtics had nowhere to go but up. And although they improved this season, their 36-46 record wouldn't be enough for a playoff berth, as Barros' year ended with him averaging about 10 points, 3.5 assists, and a steal per game. Barros was one of 2 players to appear in every game for the Celtics in the lockout-shortened 99 season, and he would see a slight increase in his minutes per game. But this was more so due to his 16 starts, and in those 16 games, he performed very well, with much improved efficiency compared to his games as a starter last year. Barros would put up double figures in 22 games, along with 2 double-doubles, which included a 23-point, 13-assist performance in an April 12th defeat of Cleveland, when he played the full 48 minutes. The Celtics had a similar roster makeup from last year, with the exception of top draft pick Paul Pierce, and although he was a great addition, he wasn't enough to turn around the team, as they would finish with a 19-31 record and miss the playoffs, with Barros' season seeing him average 9.5 points, 4 assists, and a steal per game. By 2000, the Celtics were fully committed to a youth movement, and a 32-year-old Barros didn't fit in with those plans, as although he appeared in 72 games, he wouldn't start any of them, and his 15.8 minutes per game would be his lowest average since 1991. Barros wouldn't have any type of major role on the team, and wouldn't have a single game with at least 20 points. And even with the great young players that they had, the Celtics were stagnant, finishing with a 35-47 record, and again missing the playoffs, as Barros' season had seen him average about 7 points, 2 assists, and half a steal per game. But the end of the season marked the end of Barros' return to Boston, as the feel-good story was over. Similar to his departure from Seattle, Barros was on the move a lot this offseason, first being included in a massive 14 deal which saw him end up in Dallas. But about 2 months later, in mid-October, he was included in a package sent to Detroit. Barros joined a more complete team in Detroit, with Jerry Stackhouse as their top scorer and Ben Wallace as their top defender, as Barros would slot into the rotation as a backup point guard, and would in turn act as the Pistons' top scorer off the bench in about 18 minutes per night. But injuries would keep Barros out of 22 games this year, but he would still be one of the league's premier long-range shooters, as he would shoot nearly 42% from deep, marking the 7th straight season that Barros shot over 40% from beyond the arc. Detroit didn't have the greatest year, as they were playing their first season since losing Grant Hill, and that's a big loss to recover from, so they would only manage a 32-50 record and would miss the playoffs, as Barros' year ended with him averaging about 8 points, 2 assists, and half a steal per game. The 0-2 Pistons were a much better team, but Barros would unfortunately not be a huge part of it, which is a shame, as to begin the season, he was the team's starting point guard and was giving some performances reminiscent of his best years, as over the first 14 games of the season, he had hit double figures in 6 of them, which included a season-high 17 points, while going 5 of 8 from deep in a defeat of Washington. But then a hamstring injury would lead to Barros struggling to stay on the court, as he would eventually miss over 3 months this season and appear in just 15 more games, for a Pistons team who finished at 50-32 and got a first-round matchup with Toronto. They would win the series in 5, yet Barros saw less than 4 minutes of action in the series. The second round brought Boston, and this time the Pistons lost in 5, as again Barros barely saw the court, and his season ended with him averaging about 6.5 points, 2.5 assists, and half a steal per game. Detroit would waive Barros after the season, and after not finding anyone to sign with, it appeared his career was over. After being without a team for the entire 03 season, Barros would return to Boston as an assistant coach. Then late in the season, with the Celtics set to make a playoff appearance, Barros was signed to a 10-day contract as playoff insurance, appearing in 1 regular season game for a 36-46 Celtics team, before appearing briefly in 1 game of their 6-game first-round loss to Indiana, as Barros' very brief season ended with him averaging 6 points per game over 1 game. This would be the official end to Dana Barros' playing career, allowing him to walk away more under his own terms. In more recent years, he would work with his local community, briefly dabble in coaching, and again work with the Celtics. Dana Barros was about 20 years too early. Had he been in his prime in 2015, instead of 1995, he could have put up Isaiah Thomas-type numbers. But instead, he never really had anyone buy into his playstyle enough to really let him loose. Fans got a short glimpse over his all-star year in Philly, but that was pretty much it. And it's understandable that teams wouldn't want an undersized shot chucker running their offense. But Barros was far from a shot chucker, and it was actually incredibly efficient for his size and his volume long-range shooting, even retiring with a career 3-point average over 41%. He was a freak athlete who held his own and then some in a competitive Big East, then backed up Gary Payton in Seattle without complaining, When he finally got a shot in Philly, he ran with it. But as quick as it came, it was gone, as he gradually saw his role decrease during his return to Boston. But no matter how quickly the NBA tried to move on from him, Barros maintained a positive and professional attitude. And it's unfortunate that the NBA left him behind back then, because in today's game, they'd be lining up for the services of Dana Barros. But that's it for today's episode on Dana Barros. Hope you enjoyed it, and make sure to subscribe for more videos like this one. If you liked it, check out this one on one of his fellow rookies in Seattle, or this one on his high-flying teammate in Philly. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.